Hello again. Today we are going to study together Lesson 1 in Unit 2 entitled History. What comes to your mind when you hear the word history? Yes, ancient, vintage, remember we studied this word in last video. Medieval times, Dark Ages, Middle Ages, Renaissance, Pharaohs, World War I and II, Cavemen, Stone Age, the Victorian Age, and many other things. For example, the Victorian era in the United Kingdom was from the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign in June 1837 until January 1901. Hence the name. This is why the Victorian Age is called the Victorian Age. It was named after Queen Victoria's name. Although this was the time when the British Empire expanded and the British middle classes began to flourish, there was acute poverty among the lower classes. This often led to less privileged children being forced to work in order to support themselves and their families. Before we start reading, let's discuss a bit the topic of history. For example, in what ways do you think life was different for people of your age 50 years ago and in ancient times? Yes, for example, 50 years ago, women were not educated, yet they couldn't work, vote, or inherit. Yes, children were forced into labor, into work to support their families instead of going to school. Yeah, child labor was very common at that time, especially in the Victorian age. What else? There were also fixed gender roles. For example, women were expected to stay at home, take care of children, raise children. Yeah, she couldn't get access to work, and very few women could actually work, and only they could work as governesses. Yes, what else? Yeah, the only education they could get was like homeschool. Yeah, they were tutored at home, and the skills they were taught were knitting, painting, playing the piano, singing, and dancing. They were not taught, for example, science, history, and things like that. Only men could get this kind of education because they were expected to work. Yeah. What else? Yeah, matchmakers and arranged marriages were very common at that time, and they still persist in some societies today. Okay, this 50 years ago. What about in ancient times? For example, cavemen, they used to hunt animals. Of course, there was no electricity, so they had to manage making fire to cook food. Okay. We said when we think of the word history, what comes to our mind is the word ancient. What is the meaning of the word ancient? Ancient is an adjective which means belonging to a time long ago in history. The opposite is modern. Please say it with me. Ancient, ancient, ancient. Now we are going to read together a short story related in some way to history. The story is about a girl called Rebecca who visits a museum. She's a journalist, a person who writes and does research for a newspaper, magazine articles, or news bulletins. The story also mentions a girl from Victorian times called Eliza, who is similar to Rebecca in some ways but different in others. Okay, this is the pre-reading question for this unit. In what ways is Rebecca similar to Eliza, the girl who lived in Victorian times, and in what way is she different? Let's find out after reading. Before we read, there are some very important vocabulary that you need to learn first. First, we have the word museum. Say it with me, please. Museum, museum. Museum is a noun which means a building where you can look at important objects connected with art, history, or science. Similar, similar, similar. Similar is an adjective which means alike or almost the same. The opposite is different. Different, different, different. Different is an adjective which means not similar, not like something or someone else, or not like before. Different. Okay, let's read together. The title of this article is Portrait of a Journalist. What is the meaning of the word portrait? A portrait is a painting, drawing, or a photograph of someone. And a journalist is someone whose job is writing for newspapers, magazines, television, or radio. When she arrived at the museum, Rebecca didn't quite know what to expect. She suspected the curator had seen her newspaper article with the photos of museum exhibits she had taken, which were not very good. The museum's closed, miss, the guard uttered in a tired voice. Portrait, portrait, portrait. Portrait is a noun which means a painting, drawing, or photograph of someone. Portrait. Journalist, journalist, journalist. A journalist is someone whose job is writing for newspapers, magazines, television, or radio. Journalist. Suspect, suspect, suspect. Suspect is a verb which means to think that something is probably true, especially something bad. The stress is on the second syllable. However, the noun suspect, a person who is a suspect in a crime, for example, the stress here is on the first syllable. Curator, curator, curator. A curator is a noun which means a person in charge of a museum, library, etc. Curator. Utter, utter, utter. Utter is a verb which means to say something. Utter. Let's continue reading. But I have an appointment with the curator at 7:30, Rebecca said, puzzled. Who? Mrs. Watts? Well, you'd better go in then. Rebecca pushed open the heavy wooden door and immediately came face to face with Mrs. Watts. Ah, you're Rebecca, aren't you? She said. Come this way, please. Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor as they were walking through the exhibition halls. Rebecca was beginning to feel uneasy when suddenly the curator stopped in front of an old trunk. So how do we know Rebecca has been to the museum before? Because she had written an article containing photos of museum exhibits she had taken that were not very good. And who is Mrs. Watts? She is the museum's curator. Okay, which word tells us that Rebecca was nervous while she was walking through the museum? Can you see it? Uneasy. Rebecca was beginning to feel uneasy when suddenly the curator stopped in front of an old trunk. Appointment, appointment, appointment. Appointment is a noun which means a time that you have arranged to see someone. Appointment. Puzzled, puzzled, puzzled. Rebecca was puzzled. Puzzled is an adjective which means confused and unable to understand something. Puzzled. Remember the guard? He told Rebecca, "You'd better get in." What is the meaning of the word "you'd better" plus verb in the infinitive? This expression is used to suggest something or give advice to someone. For example, "You'd better study well." Heavy, heavy, heavy. Heavy is an adjective which means weights a lot, something that weights a lot. The opposite is light. The opposite is light. Face to face, face to face. Face to face is an idiom which means between people who are in the same place. A face-to-face meeting or conversation, etc., is one where you are with another person and talking to them. For example, a face-to-face interview. Echo, echo, echo. Echo can be a verb and a noun. If a sound echoes, you hear it again and again, usually because you are in a large empty place. For example, Ben, 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 Ben. This is an echo. Uneasy, uneasy, uneasy. Uneasy is an adjective which means worried or afraid because you think something bad might happen. Uneasy. Trunk, trunk, trunk. Trunk is a noun which means a very large box made of wood or metal in which clothes, books, etc. are stored or packed for travel. It was very common in the Victorian age. Yeah. Trunk. Now let's continue reading. "I was researching the history of a new exhibit last week," she said. "It's this trunk from 1867. It belonged to a young girl called Eliza who wanted to become a journalist. Unfortunately, Victorian society didn't approve of such a profession, didn't approve of such a job. Sadly and unluckily for a girl, she was expected to marry and have children. Her trunk contained a diary, and I also found this." Mrs. Watts took a scroll out of the trunk and handed it to Rebecca. When she looked at it, Rebecca went as white as a sheet. It was a portrait of a girl who looked exactly like her. Amazing! What could that be? Research, research, research. Research is a verb which means to study a subject in order to discover new information about it. Research. Unfortunately, unfortunately, unfortunately. Unfortunately is an adverb which means unluckily. Approve, approve, approve. Approve is a verb which means to allow something, accept a proposal, or think that someone or something is right or suitable. The opposite is disapprove. Profession, profession, profession. Profession is a noun which means a job, a type of work that needs special training or education. For example, fireman, chef, police officer, doctor, journalist, curator, etc. Scroll, scroll. Scroll is a noun which means a long piece of paper that can be rolled up and is used as an official document. Scroll. As white as a sheet. As white as a sheet. As white as a sheet. As white as a sheet is an idiom. If someone is as white as a sheet, his or her face is very pale, usually because of illness, shock, or fear. As white as a sheet. Okay, let's continue. But who was she? Who was this woman in the portrait? Rebecca asked in amazement. That's the interesting part, said the curator. I was on my way to your newspaper's offices on Monday to complain about your use of photos of museum exhibits, but you were leaving the building just as I arrived. I was very surprised when I saw your face. I rushed back to the museum and did more research. It turns out that Eliza was your ancestor. Wow. Amazement. 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 Amazement is a noun which means astonishment, a feeling of great surprise. Amazement. Complain. Complain. Complain is a verb which means to say that you are annoyed, not satisfied, or unhappy about something or someone. Complain. Rushed. 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 Rushed is a verb. To rush means to hurry, to move very quickly, especially because you need to be somewhere very soon. Rushed. Turn out. Turn out. Turn out. Turn out is a phrasal verb which means to happen in a particular way or to have a particular result, especially an unwanted and unexpected one. For example, he turns out to be a zombie. It was not expected. Ancestor, ancestor, ancestor. Ancestor is a noun which means a person in your family who lived a long time ago. For example, Eliza, the girl from the Victorian times in the portrait, she happens to be, it was not unexpected though, the journalist's ancestor, Rebecca's ancestor. Rebecca was speechless. She was speechless. She didn't know what to say. She realized how lucky she was that, unlike Eliza, her dreams had come true. She had always wanted to be a journalist, and she had become one. She couldn't wait to find out more. She was thinking about the story she could write about Eliza when suddenly the curator spoke again. Now, I'm sure you have lots of questions, but about those photos, she said with a smile on her face. Okay, how did Rebecca feel when she saw the portrait? She didn't know what to say. She was speechless. What makes Rebecca feel lucky? That her dreams to become a journalist came true. Unlike Eliza, she was very lucky because she didn't live in Victorian age. She was not restricted by the traditions of that time. Speechless, speechless, speechless. Speechless is an adjective which means unable to speak because you feel angry or upset or excited. Speechless. Realize, realize, realize. Realize is a verb which means to know or understand something. Realize. A dream come true. A dream come true. A dream come true. A dream come true is an idiom which means it really happened. Find out. Find out. Find out. Find out is a phrasal verb which means to get information about something. Find out. Society. 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 A society is a large group of people who live in the same country or area and have the same laws, traditions, etc. For example, the Victorian society was very strict. Fleet, fleet, fleet. Fleet is a noun which means a group of ships or a number of buses, aircrafts, etc. Fleet. Admiral, admiral, admiral. An admiral is an officer of very high rank in the Navy. Admiral, it's a noun. Yearly, yearly, yearly. Yearly is an adverb which means strange, frightening, spooky. Yearly. Okay, now it's time for practice. Find words in the article that have these meanings. The words are in the same order as they appear in the text. But before we start answering the questions, did you find the answer to the pre-reading question we read before reading the article? In what ways is Rebecca similar to Eliza, the girl who lived in Victorian times, and in what way is she different? Rebecca and Eliza are similar because they look alike and both wanted to become journalists. They are different because Rebecca succeeded in becoming a journalist, but Eliza couldn't become one because society didn't approve of women working in such a profession. Okay, number 1, a person in charge of museum exhibits is called a curator. Excellent. 2, what is the meaning of the word said? Uttered. Great. 3, confused means puzzled. Confused means puzzled. 4, scarcely means yearly. Excellent. 5, think something is suitable. Approve. Good job. 6, long roll of paper is called a scroll. Great. Circle the correct words. 1, visiting the pyramids was a dream come true. A dream come true is an idiom which means it really happened. 2, Alice came what? With a dinosaur skeleton in the museum. Alice came face to face with a dinosaur skeleton in the museum. Face to face is also an idiom. Alice and the dinosaur skeleton, they were in the same space. They were in the museum. 3, World War II came to in 1945. World War II came to an end. It finished in 1945. Came to an end is also an idiom. 4, civilization has come along since medieval times. Civilization has come a long way since medieval times. Have come a long way means to have advanced to an improved or more developed state. It became better. 5, when did Julius Caesar come to power? When did he start to rule? When did he start having political control? 6, it came as no that Hillary failed her history exam. It came as no surprise that Hillary failed her history exam. Came as no surprise is also an idiom which means it was expected to happen. Come to an end. Come to an end. Come to an end. Come to an end is an idiom which means it finished. Remember, World War II came to an end in 1945. Have come a long way. Have come a long way. Have come a long way is also an idiom which means to have advanced to an improved or more developed state. It became better. Civilization came a long way since medieval times. Come to power. Come to power. Come to power is also an idiom which means to start having political control. When did Julius Caesar come to power? When did he start having political control? Come as no surprise. Come as no surprise. Come as no surprise is also an idiom which means it was expected to happen. Thank you. Bye.